Hey everyone, and welcome to Accounting with Miss G. And today we are going to be doing the general ledger, a section of work a lot of kids don't usually like. It's actually one of my favorites though. So we're going to break it down step by step so it's a bit more manageable. And this is one of the activities that you could get. On the back side of it are all the accounts that they would want you to do, so trading stock, bank, sales, and cost of sales. I've rewritten them out in a ledger book just so that it's easier when explaining it, so I don't have to flip backwards and forwards. Alright, so we're looking at the following. Balances appear for Alex Supplies on the 1st of April 2025, and they give you 4 amounts. This favorable means that it's positive. There's a cash receipts journal totals and your cash payment journal total. So these amounts need to go into the relevant accounts. And here they've only given you 4 accounts, so we're only going to be dealing with these 4. Okay, so step number 1 when doing a general ledger is to always enter in your opening balances or totals, as we might call them, for we're looking at the 1st of April. We're then going to enter in our CRJ totals, and we're then going to enter in our CPJ totals, and finally we are going to balance for the next month, so the 1st of May. Alright, so first step, we're going to enter in our balances, bank, trading stock, sales, and equipment. You'll notice that equipment is there, but there is no place to enter equipment, so we're just not going to enter in that one. Okay, now the problem that happens is that people don't know which side to enter in the accounts. So let me write it at the bottom rather here. A very useful trick that I learned is something called dead click. So you need to be able to understand this before being able to do your general ledger. Okay, and it's pretty simple. The 4 accounts, debtors, expenses, assets, and drawings all increase on the debit side. So your assets go up on the debit side, your expenses go up on the debit side, and so on and so forth. Then you get creditors, liabilities, income, and capital. They all increase on the credit side. So in other words, if you buy an asset, your assets are increasing, so you're going to write it on the debit side. If you sell an asset, your assets are decreasing, so you're going to then write it on the credit side. So these 4 are happy on the debit side. These 4 are happy on the credit side, or positive. When you write them on the opposite side, you're telling me now that they are going down, they are negative. So when you receive a loan, your liabilities increase, so they will go on the credit side. When you pay for your loan, the amount that you owe would decrease, and therefore you would write it on the debit side this time. Okay, so using dead click, you're going to go back to your balances. Now bank, which you must know is an asset, okay, that would go on the debit side. Trading stock, which is also an asset, is also going to go on the debit side. And lastly, sales, which is the type of income, is going to go on the credit side. So we need to enter those in on the side depending on dead click. So make sure that you remember this, jot this down somewhere on a question paper when you receive your question paper so that you don't forget. But you are going to need to know when it's an expense, an asset, an income, or a liability from studying. Okay, so let's enter in the balances. That's step number 1. So the first thing is our bank balance, which is going to go on the debit side, remember, because of dead click, it's an asset, is going to go over here. So it's for the 1st of April 2025, and we call it your balance. So all the balances that go in the balance sheet section, you'll see at the top there, that's the name of the section in orange, they'll be called a balance. Brought down, and the amount is 56,000. Okay. Next step we're looking at is your trading stock, which is also an asset. So it's also going to go on the debit side. Also for the start of the month, 1st of April 2025, and we call it balance again because we're entering in our balance for the start of the month, brought down of 10,000. All right. So when entering in your balances in the balance sheet section, we call them balance. So that's pretty easy. In the balance sheet section, we call our balances balance. But in the nominal section, we don't call them that anymore. We call them totals. So the way I always remember it, and it's a bit of a corny way, as I've always said to my kids, but I am corny, so I suppose what can you expect? Remember it like this. You are so phenomenal, you can't total all your, and then BF, best friends. You can write BF or you can write BD, but I like BF because of the acronym. It works out nicely. Okay. So your sales is going to go on the credit side because it's an income. So on the credit side, again for the 1st of April 2025, we're not going to call it balance now because it's not the balance section, it's the nominal section. So we're going to write it as total. Brought forward, and the amount was 5,000 Rand. There it is over there. Okay, so we've done step number 1. We've entered in all the balances into our general ledger. Next step is your cash receipts journal. So there's bank sales, cost of sales, and current income. There is no current income heading, so I'm going to leave that out, but I can enter the other 3. So your bank, from the CRJ, if you're receiving money, what is happening to your bank account? Bank is an asset and it's increasing. Okay. And that amount, that 78,000 Rand, is the total amount of money that you've received. So what we call it in the general ledger is total receipts. Okay. If we use that principle then, your bank from the CPJ is making your bank account, when you're paying, it's making your bank account go down because now money is leaving your account. And therefore, we call it your total payments in the general ledger. All right. Your sales, which is an income, is increasing because now you've made more sales. And where does that money go into? It goes into your bank account. So we're going to call this account bank in the general ledger. And same over here for trading stock. When you buy trading stock is an asset, what's happening to your trading stock? So you go into the shop, you buy a whole lot of stock, so now your stock has increased. And by you paying for that trading stock, it also has affected your bank. So we're going to call it bank in the CPJ. Equipment, there's no place for that, so we don't have to enter that in. Lastly, cost of sales is the slightly tricky one. Okay, because remember, for every debit there's a credit. So when you make money for sales, it's the two accounts. The one account that's being credited is your sales, and your bank is being debited for the money that you've made. Because if you think of it this way, let me jot it down over here. So that's 6,000 Rand sales. Okay, so your sales is increasing by 6,000 Rand, so that's the credit. Where does that 6,000 Rand go? It goes into the bank account. So for every debit, there's a credit. So essentially everything that affects your bank account, like sales, current income would be one, trading stock and equipment, anything that affects your bank, we call bank. Cost of sales, however, does not affect your bank account. So let me use a scenario. You come into my business, all right, and I sell Cokies for a living and highlighters and pens and pencils, different types of colorful stationery. Anyone who knows me knows that I love highlighters. All right. When you come into the business, you decide you want to buy 2 highlighters. You're going to buy the pink and the yellow one. Okay, for me as a business, I have made a sale. I've sold 2 highlighters to you. So my bank account has gone up, and the amount that I have sold has also increased, because originally I'd sold no highlighters. Now I've sold 2. But during that time, what has happened? My highlighters have gone down, the amount of highlighters I have. So my trading stock has decreased. I then need to replace these 2 highlighters to keep my business running. And when I buy these highlighters, I'm going to buy them from my supplier at cost price. And we call that essentially cost of sales. So this is how cost of sales is entered in always for the CRJ. Okay. It goes once under trading stock heading. So remember, when you're selling something, what is happening over here? You have lost trading stock. So that cost of sales of 14,000 is going to go on that side. And you're going to call it cost of sales. Under the cost of sales heading, on the credit side, you need your cost of sales, which is an expense, is increasing. So therefore, why is it increasing? Because you're replacing your trading stock of 14,000. So now there is a credit and a debit. Whereas if I just entered this in on one side, it would not have a buddy, I suppose. If it was just entered in on the credit side, there'd be no debit for it, like with sales, because sales is Chomi, is bank. Sales and bank, they affect each other. But cost of sales does not affect your bank account. Because remember, cost of sales is what you paid as a business for these items. So if I buy these highlighters at 5 Rand each from my supplier, so I paid 20 Rand for these. So the cost price is 5 Rand, or the cost of sales. If I sell it for 20 Rand, that's my selling price or my sales price. Okay, so you're going to have to remember, please, the cost of sales from your CRJ is entered like this. Once under trading stock on the right, and once under cost of sales on the left. Okay, so let's enter in our CRJs first. So bank is going to go under bank. On what side? We said the debit side, because you're receiving money. All right, and it's for the end of April, so 30th of April. And we call it total receipts, because it's the total amount of money that you received, and it's CRJ number 4. There's the number there. If there's no number, you just write CRJ. And the total was 78,000. Okay. Everything else you received money for would then essentially go on the credit side. Except remember, cost of sales. You're not receiving money for cost of sales, so that's going to have to go in differently. So your sales is going to go on the credit side because it's an income and it's increasing. On the 30th, you received money for sales and it went into your bank. CRJ4, the sales amount was 6,000. Cost of sales goes in twice. Very, very, very important. Please note. Okay, so when I sold my highlighters, my sales went up and my bank went up. So technically we've done that. My sales went up and my bank account went up because bank is an asset. Okay, but during that time that I made that sale of those highlighters, my trading stock decreased. Why did it decrease? Because the cost of the sale that I made of my highlighters, that's CRJ4 for the 30th of April. And that amount is 14,000. Okay, so your trading stock has decreased because of cost of sales. Now, if I left it like that, by just entering all my CRJs for what I received money for, so like this goes on the debit side and everything else goes on the credit. If I left cost of sales here, there is no credit yet to essentially cancel each other out, to have the accounting rule every debit there's a credit. So I rewrite this under cost of sales on the debit side this time, and I just call it trading stock. Because my cost of sales is an expense, I need to replace my stock. And that's increased now because I must replace the trading stock that I sold. So we call it CRJ4. Exactly the same number. Nothing else has changed. Right, so make sure that you write your cost of sales in twice. Once under trading stock on the credit side as cost of sales, and once under cost of sales on the debit side as trading stock. These amounts must be the same. Very, very important. Lastly, we're going to enter in our CPJ totals. So now my bank is decreasing. Bank is an asset, it's decreasing. So bank is decreasing. So on this side, I'm going to be writing my bank total for the 30th of April. And we call it, this time, not total receipts, but total payments, because that's the total amount of money that you paid. CPJ4, and that was 19,000 Rand that I got from there. Okay. Then essentially everything that you paid for is going to go on the debit side. Because most of the time you're buying assets or you're paying for expenses, and both of those go on the debit side according to dead click. Okay, so trading stock you've now paid for, so it's increased. Trading stock you've paid for, it's increased. And what account has it affected when you bought that trading stock? It affected your bank. So it's CPJ4 of 11,000. So again, everything that affects your bank account, we call bank. So sales and current income affect your bank account, so we'd call them bank because that's where they get entered into. Trading stock and equipment affect your bank account because that's how you would calculate the total. And then bank from the CRJ is called total receipts. Bank from the CPJ is called total payments. Just cost of sales, remember, is the one that gets entered in twice because it does not affect the bank. So it doesn't have a chomi, so we need to be able to create one for it. Okay. Then lastly, you're going to need to balance the balance sheet section. And so I'm going to teach you a little acronym to help you remember how to balance. You can also write this somewhere. You write it on the side over here. So teachers should bring cake tomorrow. Okay, you wish. Not happening. T is for total. S is for subtract. B is for balance. C is for carry. And T is for total again. So teachers should bring cake tomorrow. Total, subtract, balance, carry, total. So on your general ledger somewhere, you can always just scribble it down. Teachers should bring cake tomorrow. Follow those steps. And you're only going to balance the balance sheet section, so these two orange accounts, when there are amounts on both sides. So it's like a seesaw. So now currently the seesaw is not level, and we need to balance it out so that it is. So look at both sides. which side is the biggest? The debit side or the credit side? If I add these two up together, the debit side is going to be the biggest. So the first T is total. So 10,000 and 11,000 gives me 21,000. Now when you total, you do a line at the top and a line at the bottom. Okay, so I've done step number 1. Step number 2 is I take the 21,000 and I subtract that 14,000. So 21,000 and minus 14,000 gives me 7,000. I've subtracted. What I've worked out here is so letter B is my balance. Still working on the debit side. I have calculated my balance brought down of 7,000 for the first of the next month, so May 2025. What I do after that is C for carry. I take my balance and I carry it across. You can leave the date out because the date's actually the 30th of April this time, so you don't need to rewrite it. It's balance, and now because you've carried it becomes CD carried down of 7,000. I've carried it. And the last step is T for total. When I add these two up together, it gives me 21,000. So now my totals are the same. Don't forget the dark line at the top and the bottom. And they must be on the same line. So be very, very careful of that. Okay. When in doubt, you can always skip one line just to make sure that you've got enough space. But your totals must be the same. Okay, so let's try again. Teachers should bring cake tomorrow. We're going to look at bank. This side is definitely bigger than your total payments. So we've got 56,000 plus 78,000. And we get 134,000. That's my total. Totaling the biggest side. So that's that step done. When it's a total, dark line at the top and at the bottom to show that it's a total. I take that total and I subtract everything. If there's 1 or 2 or 3 amounts from the side, you subtract everything on the opposite side. So I'm going to minus that, 19,000. And it gives me 115,000. So 134,000 minus 19,000. Still working on this side. So I've subtracted. What I've just worked out now is my balance brought down for the 1st of May 2025. I then carry it across. I take my balance. This one I've just worked out. And essentially, like I always think, C for carry, C for copy. I'm copying it across of 115,000. And then when I add it up, I total it, the last step. It is going to give me 134,000 Rand. And now my totals are the same and on the same line. If, for example, when you're adding it up, you do the first step. Like here, we added these two up to get our total because we could see this side was bigger. If the credit side is bigger, then you carry on the same way. You total it. You take your total, you subtract everything on this side, and you work out your balance brought down. You then take your balance brought down, you copy it across, and you total again. So that's still the same. Okay, so remember that. Teachers should bring cake tomorrow. Total, subtract balance, carry total. And then lastly, in the nominal section, you won't need to balance anything here. We're just going to add up. This is 11,000, and there's nothing to add up at cost of sale, so we can just leave that just like that. All right. So just don't forget the steps of the general ledger. You enter in your balances, which we did first. Then we entered in all our CRJ totals. Bank was called total receipts. Everything else that affected your bank we called bank. But cost of sales is a tricky one that doesn't affect your bank account. Remember, because if you're selling a product to a customer, they're just paying for the sales price. They're not paying for the sales and the cost of sales. Okay, so this gets entered in twice like this. You're going to need to study that. It's important. And then cash payments journal was the next totals. Bank from the cash payments journal is called total payments. And then these two accounts would be called bank because they're both affecting your bank account because you're paying for trading stock and you're paying for equipment. Then lastly, we balance for the 1st of May using teachers should bring cake tomorrow to help you remember the order of balancing your accounts in the balance sheet section. Okay. Then don't forget dead click, please. This is obviously a really, really important part. You can't do the general ledger without it because it helps you decide what goes on what side. I hope that helped you with understanding the general ledger. Just remember, take it step by step, deep breath, and I know you've got this.